Hi, I'm Julie Chan from Southwark Council. I'm interested in what the presenters have been saying about prevention of health issues and working with the partnerships, and wondered what you're doing to engage with people like the education workforce and children's centres and safeguarding boards to promote that side of things.
Who'd like to pick that one up? Yvonne?
What? No? That better? Yes. Thank you. Yes, that's a really good question, because I think certainly in Greater Manchester we're starting to look at how do we work across those organisational boundaries and those professional boundaries to start looking at the detail around the education programmes. I'm not quite sure that we're there yet. I think it isn't that easy. But certainly in terms of what's happening in the Manchester locality is the what they call the Living Longer, Living Better programme, which is around true integration across that footprint and engaging with those bodies who you mentioned. I think one of the issues I have is in terms of trying to understand from Public Health England colleagues in terms of what is their role going forward around that prevention agenda, and how do we ensure that the broader workforce does start to engage in a different mindset, focusing more on the asset that is the individual and enabling them to do what they need to do in order to sustain their health and well-being going forward. So I think there are some good examples in Manchester. Wigan as well has now started that same conversation where they have more of a coaching conversation with individuals, which is aimed at preventing them accessing services in the right place. So I don't think it's probably as defined as you say, but I think it is happening probably much more informally at the moment. Not sure whether that answers your question, but it's an attempt.
Thank you, Yvonne. Any other panel members on that? Martin?
All I was going to say is one of the points I was trying to get across, I think, is that this the work that we're talking particularly today about kind of health and care integration, but I think that needs to be seen as a bigger piece, really. Certainly for most local authorities, our local authorities say, because of the funding issues, are really thinking fundamentally about what the council is here to do, less a deliverer of service, much more empowering the community and empowering the community to take responsibility themselves. And so the remodelling of our organisation, our new organisation demand design very much has that kind of prevention services, integrated prevention services at its heart, at the core, because that is how we're going to be able to continue to meet the needs of our community. So I think it's a conversation that needs to have across services about what does that mean in practice, and what does it mean for the workforce, and what does it mean about how they work together, and about the kind of skills that we need to have within that workforce.
Thanks, Martin. Next question, Mark at the back. Mark, and then our colleague on the next table.
Thanks. I was really struck, Julian, by what you were saying about how much you think you can do or will be doing without formal structural change and sort of goodwill, working together and so forth, I'm characterising. And in some extent the contrast with what Florence, I'm sorry, is that your name? Sorry, Yvonne, I beg your pardon. Yvonne was saying about the work in Manchester. And clear work streams on governance and structure and potentially fairly radical terms and conditions type changes. How much is necessary? How much is just delaying the is it devolution that's allowed you more autonomy to do those sort of things? Gracious. Or is it...
It's just the local ghosts, don't worry.
Anyway, that's the theme of my question. Sorry, interrupted.
Yeah, I think devolution has allowed us to put that governance infrastructure in place, because I think if we look at leadership, we need to have a system, whether it's a system leadership process, distributed, collective, whatever terminology we use, we've got to give the system a reason to do what it needs to do. It needs to be clear about what the future looks like. So the governance infrastructure is, I think, extremely important in saying, this is the ask. Now, how do we work together as leaders in order to deliver that? But at the same time, I think certainly at grassroots level, for want of a better phrase, what I do see is members of the workforce who, in principle, are already doing that anyway. They're working across organisational boundaries. All we need to do is harness that in a way which allows us to work more collaboratively, allows us to say it's not about individual sovereignty, it is about we're doing this for the system. So I think the governance infrastructure is important, because certainly I've struggled around the workforce component because, like usual, and HR colleagues will probably support with that, we always come late to the party. My view is that we need to be in there at the early stages of this in order to design and develop the workforce of the future in line with any of the operating models, locality plans, strategic plans, whatever we call it, to help design that workforce. What's happened is that the strategic plan has been issued. Now everyone's saying, and what does that mean for the workforce? My comment is, well, as organisations, you should have been thinking about that as part of the developing your particular plans. So why is it so late in the day? But actually putting together the governance infrastructure that I'm doing now helps people to focus on the things that they need to do in a much more structured way. And because it's attached to money, it also allows people to think, well, if I don't do this, I won't get that, therefore I can't make that change, or I can't do what I need to do. And there are some very powerful players in Greater Manchester. It's a very big foundation trust who have ambitions. I'll leave it at that.
As we have in London. Julian. Thank you.
I think my starting point is that, yes, you're very lucky to have a strategic plan, but we don't know what timescales are for strategic plans in the West Midlands. There is the West Midlands Combined Authority, but I think we're still some way away from where Manchester currently are. And if we waited for a strategic plan, we'd be doing nothing for probably the next couple of years. I think also across the West Midlands, it's not such a unitary sort of body that you have in Greater Manchester. So we've got shire counties that are very separate and don't associate themselves at all with Birmingham and the more urban parts of the West Midlands. So we won't have one strategic plan. We'll be lucky to have any strategic plans. And I think the other thing I wanted to bring into this was when we looked at our best practice and when we did our research, we found that some of the best examples of integrated working were where they'd taken that step forward without doing any sort of formal integration. So Torbay is the example that is often used, whereby they started working together a long time before they did any formal merger into a care trust. So I think the skills will be the same. We still need to develop the skills, but what we don't want to do is get too stuck at that point of what do we do about terms and conditions? Do we need to unify everybody's terms and conditions, and all of the debate that would follow on from that.
Thank you. Martin, do you want to add anything?
I mentioned the work by the Centre for Workforce Intelligence, and one of the key points they make is that it's horses for courses, and the approach to workforce integration or integrated working needs to reflect the particular circumstances of the place. And it may be right in some places, it seems to be in Greater Manchester, to look at those more structural issues, but in others not. And my experience really is that terms and conditions and debate about them can go on interminably and could be a real impediment to progress. And is it the most important thing? Is it the thing that's going to drive change? Possibly not. So if you can manage without getting into what can be some very difficult discussions, then best to avoid, I would say.